News finds something that didn't exist last time, a support network of sorts mobilizing around the public targets of Trump and Patel's ire. Quote, lawyers and pro-democracy advocates are in the early stages of building a nationwide network of specialists aimed at defending and protecting people who may be targeted for retribution once President-elect Donald Trump takes office. That's according to multiple people involved in the effort. Those working to create the infrastructure said that in addition to lawyers, they are recruiting accountants to help people who may find their taxes under audit, employment experts to advise those who could be fired or reassigned without cause, public relations professionals to assist anyone whose reputations might be tarnished by accusations, and even psychologists to help potential targets manage the stress that comes with being in the federal government's crosshairs. That effort is where we start the hour with some of our favorite experts and friends. Former lead investigator for the January 6th Select Committee, Tim Hafey's here. Also joining us, former acting assistant attorney general for national security at the Department of Justice, MSNBC legal analyst Mary McCord's here, and president of Media Matters for America, Angelo Carusone is back. Angelo, I love starting with you for many reasons, but chief among them is your granular understanding of what exactly is in black and white in writing in terms of their plans for retribution using the FBI. Will you take us through, again, not being paranoid, not projecting onto them things Trump said at rallies, but what is in the plan?
I mean, they wrote it down, and then they didn't just write it down, they then talked about it. And so part of what the strategy is a bit of a shock and awe. You go in right away, and you fire as many people as you possibly can. And though, even if you can't, you install as many loyalists, those that don't need to be given assignments of retribution because they already understand the assignment. They're going in with the assignment. And that's what Project 2025 was designed to do, was to actually give both the step-by-step guide for what has to happen out of the gate and to then vet and organize the personnel that can help execute that. Because it's worth keeping in mind that when we talk about Kash Patel as potentially the FBI director, he's not going to be doing all the work himself. That's going to need to be assigned out to actual agents and people at the FBI. And that's where this larger infrastructure comes in place. MAGA had been professionalized over the past few years via Project 2025. And that's how it turns that's how you turn these agencies into an actual instrument of revenge. And so when you take that and you overlay that with the things that Patel has already been saying publicly, the idea is you go out there, you find a couple of these individuals that will send a very clear message, and you just investigate. And you find one or two things that you can really hang your hat onto to unravel these larger narratives. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that they're going after January 6th. Because one of the first things they need to show is that all of the attacks against Trump over the past few years were all illegitimate, because this entire January 6th thing was nothing more than a hoax perpetuated by the media and Democrats in order to serve as one of the bulwarks for the deep state against Donald Trump. And that's part of it. It's to send a message, and it's now built on top of a much more professional operation.
The other thing I was thinking about, Angelo, where they may seek to be more, I don't even know the word, but more maniacal in their selections to lead the U.S. Attorney's Office, is they met some resistance in people like Jeff Berman, who was the U.S. Attorney overseeing SDNY, who sent crummy cases back. He was asked to, I think, investigate or bring a case against either Kerry or Greg Craig. He writes about it in his book, and he sends it back to Maine DOJ, and they simply farmed it out to a more amenable office. It feels like they maybe have learned how to avoid those pockets of resistance.
That's exactly right. I mean, one of the things that Patel has indicated very clearly is that most of the things that are done should no longer be, both the investigation side as well as the prosecution side, you should avoid Washington, D.C. as much as possible. In fact, you should move as much of the investigations out to offices across the country. And whenever you can, you should stretch the degree of jurisdiction, and you should make prosecutions all across the country as well in friendlier jurisdictions where the jury pool there is going to be more sympathetic to the story that you're telling, or maybe the targets that you're going after. So it's not just that they, in terms of the initiation of these investigations and potential prosecutions, they've also thought about how to help them be successful on the back end as well by finding more friendlier forums and more friendly jury pools. And the part that I find most disturbing in all of this is Patel's particular understanding of not just all these execution parts, but then his relationship to the larger right-wing media fever swamps. One of the things he bragged about when he was on the board at Truth Social was how they would take narratives from QAnon, from the QAnon sort of, and weave them into their overall messaging, because it helped build support and kinetic energy and momentum for the stories that they were telling. And so when you have somebody that understands how to tap into the sort of this right-wing media machine and those fever swamps, and how to sort of take these little breadcrumbs that you would get as a result of these investigations, you can start to see how it all comes together. You break main justice, so that's no longer one of the barriers or firewalls against injustice. You farm it out to as many friendly places as you can that are going to pursue these investigations, maybe way outside the bounds and the norms. Then you initiate prosecutions in forums where over the last year, you've been using these breadcrumbs to tell, and the right-wing media, to tell these stories that validate the already false narratives and conspiracies that many of these right-wing audiences believe. And now you're going to hand them a target served up on a platter in a prosecution that never would have taken place there in the first place. But now we're in a new reality where they're really operationalizing all of these components together. And Kash Patel isn't just a key part of that. He's somebody that keenly understands it.
I mean, Mary, breadcrumbs is a good word to use for it. Senator Chris Murphy sort of had an admonition for the press in their straight coverage, which is fair, of what Congressman Loudermilk sought to do with a non-fact-based accusation against Liz Cheney that Frank Figliuzzi worried could become predicate for opening an investigation into her conduct on the January 6th Select Committee. Your thoughts about what should happen and what could happen?
Well, I think this does seem like it was basically fabricated in order to make a referral come from Congress for a criminal investigation so that the incoming president can do the kind of thing he tends to do, which is a bit of a dodge and a weave. I'm not going to direct investigations. Oh, but these people may deserve to be to be investigated. You know, this will be up to Kash Patel. Oh, Congress seems to think that they need to be investigated. And so I think it does provide some cover to him and some sort of, at least from his perspective, plausible deniability that he's not the one directing any type of retribution. This is coming from Congress, from the House after an extensive 2-year investigation. You know, there's another thing I worry about besides the fact that potentially Kash Patel will find enough complicit people within the FBI to actually launch largely baseless investigations. But I also worry about the distraction of resources, of FBI resources and potentially Department of Justice resources from things that actually should be getting investigated. We are certainly not at any low point when it comes to other types of national security threats, both terrorism threats as well as espionage threats, threats from our adversaries. We certainly have other just more traditional domestic criminal cases that the FBI normally spends time on. Those include, you know, fraud investigations, transnational drug trafficking. They include hate crimes, right? So there are a lot of other things, a lot of other areas that the FBI's vast resources should be deployed to. And you know, in addition to being concerned about baseless investigations, I'm also concerned about just really dropping the ball when it comes to legitimate national security concerns and also public safety concerns.
I mean, I share your worry, Mary, but there hasn't been a book written about the first Trump presidency that didn't detail Trump constantly hectoring the likes of Bill Barr and Christopher Wray over inane things, fabricated political prosecutions and investigations that had nothing to do with the ongoing threats from China and Iran and Russia and otherwise. I mean, have you seen any evidence that even if someone wanted to focus on the threats to U.S. national security, they would be undeterred by someone like Trump, seemingly obsessed? I mean, I could have played for 2 hours all of his musing and fetishizing political revenge.
I mean, I do think career men and women within the FBI, within the intelligence community, within the Department of Defense and the Department of Justice and our other national security agencies will be trying to keep up with the threats wherever they may come from abroad, and will be trying to take actions that they're authorized to take to try to mitigate those threats. We'll be trying to get the attention of the political appointees. And, I totally take your point and agree with you that certainly the former President Trump, his first time in office, did not seem often to want to take these things seriously. But there are people in government who will, and that could even include some appointees, including appointees who haven't been named yet. We focus so much on, the secretary level appointees and problems with nominees like Pete Hegseth, for example, certainly with someone like Kash Patel. And John Ratcliffe and others. And we have concerns about those, but there are many more who we don't know. And there is something about being in that environment and seeing the threats coming in every day. And I'm going to put Donald Trump aside because he certainly has those threats with his presidential daily briefing presented to him every day. I don't know how much he listened to those presentations, but there are others who are in that milieu all day long, every day, who will appreciate, I do believe, will appreciate the seriousness and try to take them seriously and try to make sure adequate resources are put toward them. I mean, that's what I have to hope for.
That's our best hope, that they'll be scared enough by the actual intelligence that they'll see it, that it won't be influenced by anyone else atop those agencies, and respond in a manner consistent with the history of people in these agencies. Tim Hafey, let's talk about Congressman Loudermilk and what he's done. This also may have a degree of something personal involved. Wasn't he also investigated, or his office investigated, for conduct that included folks and visitors to his office taking some strange photos and touring? Do I have that right?
Yes, Nicolle, exactly right. Perhaps I always hesitate to ascribe undue motivation to any public servant absent evidence, but it is certainly true that for a period of time, the Select Committee focused on a tour that Representative Loudermilk gave to some constituents who ended up at the Capitol the next day. If you recall, there was some allegation early on that there had been members of Congress that gave tours to rioters that somehow were involved in a collusion or conspiracy to help people prepare for an insurrection. Candidly, we did not find evidence of that, of explicit agreement between members of Congress and rioters, surveillance or tours that gave rise to that kind of activity. We looked at it and we did not reach those conclusions, and we said so. Representative Loudermilk's tour was of a constituent who, yes, came to Washington to participate in the Ellipse rally and ended up at the Capitol, was not a charged rioter, this person to whom he gave a tour. And he did take some photographs, this constituent, in the Capitol complex, in the office buildings. But we never concluded that Representative Loudermilk did anything affirmatively to aid an insurrection. That said, the focus on him, yes, was unusual and was different from other members of Congress. He then is the person who's the chairman of the subcommittee on administration that is investigating the investigators. And I have to say, reading his report, there is just absolutely no basis for the very serious allegations he makes against Ms. Cheney, against Chairman Thompson in the committee. This notion of destroying records is a complete fabrication. Every official record of the Select Committee was maintained. The videos of witness interviews are not the official record. The official record of those interviews is the transcript. Those were all maintained. A handful of those involved national security